Hi, folks. Thanks for joining this session. We're going to be looking at ways for leaders to understand and improve flow across organizations. And this has been kind of an obsession of mine for a very long time. I've been in tech for just over 20 years, and it's really been a focus of mine to understand and improve the flow of work because I've been in a lot of these positions that require faster, sooner, safer, happier software delivery over the years. And these techniques that I'm going to share with you are the culmination of all that experience and what I've seen work for myself and for my clients. So this is going to be a story, and I want to introduce Sharon here. Sharon's going to be playing the position of my boss in the story. Which is kind of an amalgamation of several characters and clients that I work with. But we're really going to be talking about optimizing clarity, value, and flow across organizations. We're also going to be looking at mapping out what's inside individual heads and getting that into a surface that everybody can see and everyone can collaborate on. We're going to look at bridging the gaps between leaders, peers, and contributors, and then creating win-win-win scenarios for all of those involved. So we're going to start with a challenge. The organization that I work with has this huge backlog that's driven by all these challenges that they're facing, and we have to go faster if we're going to tackle this backlog, if we're going to stay ahead of the competition. So it comes to me to improve my software delivery performance by doubling it. And how are we going to get there? Let's first step back and consider that before we try and do anything, most of the efforts that we're trying to pursue in terms of better performance, digital transformation, whatever it is, they fail from a lack of clarity, right? They fail because we don't really understand either the problem, the opportunity, the landscape, our current state, where we're headed. And so what I want to present is this idea of collaborative mapping with a few specific techniques that have worked extremely well for me and folks that I work with as a method to tackle this scenario and this challenge of lacking clarity. So one of the things that factor into lacking clarity is the fact that we all have different perspectives. If you ask 8 people what the most important thing to do is, you'll probably get 8 answers. And so we need ways of bringing folks together and visualizing what we're doing, what our environment looks like, so that we can understand where we can focus to drive the best results. And there is no way to copy this from Netflix, from Spotify, from whoever you want. You can't cookie cutter it. You can't adopt a framework that's just going to do it for you. You really have to be generating these insights and generating this understanding of your organization yourself from the inside. So the practice of mapping really provides a method to do that. And so we can bring folks together, whether they are able to sit in the same room or if they're spread out all over the globe, we can bring them together. We can build the same understanding of what is happening in our teams. And we can do all of this in a very highly engaging way. So this is incredibly interactive. It's sparking really new and informative conversations. What happens when we have these conversations and we build this context is that we own the outcome. We become more a part of the process. And it's like building IKEA furniture, right? You appreciate it a little bit more after you've put some effort into making it happen. And this drives alignment, right? We're doing this together. Everybody is able to take those 8 different perspectives and bring them in line with a common understanding. And this is not a cookie cutter approach. It's completely generated for each environment that it's performed in. And so you get a custom tailored picture of where you are, where you're headed, and what it's going to take to get there. This also means that while you're doing this, you're learning, and it sticks because you're doing it. because it's interactive, because you are learning how to do these practices as you are part of the mapping. And as I mentioned before, this is very easy to perform anywhere around the globe and have everybody included in the process. So this is what I call flow engineering, because it's collaborative mapping with a very specific purpose. The maps that I'm going to share with you are all tailored towards improving the flow of work across the organization. So from a high level, what this looks like is we first try to understand our desired outcome. We start by beginning with the end in mind. And then we look at the value stream to understand, what are we doing right now? What is the landscape that we're operating in? Where are the constraints in the flow currently? And then we look at dependencies to understand what is causing those constraints. How can we alleviate those constraints and address them? Perhaps there's automation. Perhaps we just have to change the way that we hand work back and forth. It really depends. It really depends on the organization, which is why we create these maps from scratch and discover what's really going to make a difference. So starting by mapping outcomes, you might remember we have to go twice as fast. We also have to make sure that quality doesn't fall apart in the process. So we can represent that here as kind of the focal point of this map. But the first thing we do is we go to the left. We actually look at, why is this outcome valuable? What is going to make this really meaningful to everyone who has to do the work? What's going to make it meaningful? How do we understand the value of it to the organization? And then we look at obstacles. We give people a chance to speak up and say, well, I think this will be a challenge that we should probably talk about. We should probably plan to address this thing. Or, why is this going to be different than the last 5 things that we tried? We can start to deeply understand, first of all, what the things are going to interrupt the team from a morale perspective. Maybe where we trip immediately after starting because people don't believe that we can actually pull this off. We can highlight all the things that might get in our way, all the Lego pieces that we might step on in the middle of the night, and give the team an opportunity to discuss those things. We don't want to get derailed by this, but if we ignore it, we might be setting ourselves up for a surprise in the future. So then we look at investigations. How can we learn more about our obstacles, our outcome, to give us a head start and help us kind of avoid any challenges that we can foresee? And measures are going to help us understand how we're making progress while we're making progress. That brings us to the value stream. So if we know we need to go twice as fast, our target is double speed software delivery, shipping twice as often. That means we have to look at the software delivery process. So with that in mind, with that outcome in mind, we now know which value stream we should focus on. And this is a representation of what it looks like as a value stream map. This is a very simple representation because I don't believe in complicated value stream maps. We get a lot of value just by representing this simply. So what you see here is a sequence of activities that happen for us to deliver value to our customers. And the magic here is in the measurement. We start by measuring how long does it take for each of these activities to be performed. And this is by talking to the team. The team says, well, sometimes it takes this long, sometimes it takes that long. We might have to average out a couple of ideas, but precision doesn't really matter. What we want is a hotspot. We want a focal point. We want to find out where our constraint is. So we also look at delays. Delays are usually a big challenge to flow, but they're usually an easy fix. So they happen because of handoffs, they happen because of queues, they happen because people forget things. And so we can look at timing of steps and timing of delays in order to highlight a focal point. In this case, we see environment setup way more time than anything else in the value stream. So we've gone from all the things that we could focus on to one focal point that the whole team can see. And it's really hard to get in an argument about this. The data is pointing us here very clearly. And it's going to take up 45% of the total time in the value stream. So if we can make a big improvement here, we're well on our way to going twice as fast. So this is an example of a little bit more advanced value stream. As you can see, though, still very simple. What we're adding here is an understanding of the people involved, the different types of activities. We've got our metrics represented. We're seeing rework where things get tossed back a percentage of the time. So we get this rich understanding of what the workflow is. Still very simple. The CEO can understand this in 30 seconds. Someone who just joined the company can understand this in 30 seconds, and that's what we want. We want clarity, right? So that brings us to dependencies, because it turns out that environment setup isn't handled by my team. I don't have any control over that, which might be why it takes so long, because it gets thrown to another department, they do something, and then it comes back to us. And so we could look at all the dependencies across the value stream, right? We could always go and assess everything. But what we really care about is just the bottleneck, right? So we can save a lot of time. We can simplify this by focusing just on environment setup. And what that says when we look into it is that it's performed by the infrastructure team, which we might know. We might have to do some digging to figure out who that is, where they are. And we certainly have to understand what is taking so long. So that brings us to a single focal point. Again, we're not worried about every possible dependency yet. We can knock off this constraint, and then we can go focus somewhere else where it's going to also drive the maximum return. But by digging into infrastructure, we come to Ludo. Now, Ludo runs the infrastructure team, and he is responsible for environment management, which is our environment setup step. He is always swamped. He is always interrupted. He is constantly fighting fires, and he's trying to juggle a number of long-running projects, like automating everything so that he can stop being so distracted all the time and dealing with tickets and shoulder taps. But as a result of the current state where he is right now, he has to ignore everything that comes in, right? He basically has no time for us. He has no time for this environment setup improvement. And so where we are as a result of this is that we're trying to go faster, I'm trying to go faster, and Ludo can't go faster. So what do we do in that scenario? And why is that happening? So if we look at Ludo's workload, he's either rejecting everything that comes in, or he's a part of this crazy scenario of being pulled in all these different directions, having to deal with conflicting incentives, all this time trying to figure out what he can do when he has very limited resources. And a lot of this starts to look very familiar, right? How are we going to make progress in this situation? So if we dig a little bit deeper into environment setup and we zoom in with Ludo and his team, then we're able to break apart environment setup into its own mini value stream. So what are the steps that are involved in environment setup? What takes them so long? And so by doing that with his team, we're able to see a few opportunities. So if we only refresh data when we need to refresh data instead of every single time, we add a little code to discover whether or not we need to do a data refresh, we can trim setup time down a lot. We can also do some simple automation. My team has stronger back-end engineers than Ludo's team has programmers. So we're able to work together to automate some manual testing that trims it down a lot. And then finally, we do another check. Do we even need to update environments? Do we need to tear down and recreate the environment every time we run this process? Turns out we don't. We add a simple check, and all of a sudden, we're down 35% of our total lead time. So with a few simple tweaks, with a little bit of pairing, we're able to get 3/4 of the way to our target outcome. And this is by collaborating in this visual mapping paradigm. So looking at this overall, define outcome together, we look at value streams together, we look at dependencies together. And as a result, we clarify goals, we get that clarity that's missing so often. We're able to identify constraints clearly and focus instead of running around trying to do everything. We're doing the thing that's going to make the biggest difference. And then we're able to address those constraints effectively by including folks who are involved in the process and finding ways to collaborate based on this common understanding, right? We don't need to sell Ludo on this improvement. It's going to benefit him just as much as it's going to benefit us. It's going to also benefit Sharon. She gets what she wants. Everyone gets improved flow, more time to focus on being creative and creating more value. So as a result, Ludo goes faster, I go faster, the business goes faster. And if you're interested in how to do that, how to do even more, there's a number of maps that are described in an ebook that I have at flow.visible.is. I would love for you to check it out. It's going to give you a lot of information about how to run this process with my help or without my help, and give you a big picture of how this factors into continuous improvement and even beyond. It goes into capabilities, it goes into creating a roadmap that helps you with your technical roadmaps and your product roadmaps and bringing them together and really illustrating what's going to make the biggest difference to your organization as a focal point and bringing everybody along for the ride there. Also, I've got a book coming out on this subject next year. I'm just finishing the manuscript shortly. It's going to be coming out through IT Revolution, who you might know through the Phoenix Project, the Unicorn Project, the DevOps Handbook, Agile Conversations, Team Topologies. They're an incredible group, and me and Andrew Davis, my co-author, are going to be releasing a book on this subject. But in the meantime, we've got this site, inside-out.work, where you'll get a bi-weekly newsletter of our progress. So we're going to be talking about making the book, all of the context, everything that's going into the book, our experiences, things that we're hearing from elsewhere. We're right in the middle of the value stream management space. So there's a ton of stuff happening there, and you can follow along. You can also reach out to me at visible.is. I would love to hear from you, whether you've got a challenge, an idea, a question. I would very much love to hear from you and have a conversation. So with that, thank you very much for having me. I hope you enjoy the rest of the event. Take care.